Hello, good evening, and welcome everybody, and a happy New Year to you all. Welcome to the first Sigma meeting of 2023. For those who don't know me, my name is Pete Sherman. I'm the chairman of Sigma, and I'll be your MC for the evening. I'd like to start off by welcoming not just the Sigma members we have tonight, but a very big welcome to all the new members we've had tonight. We seem to be getting quite a few new members joining all the time now, which is absolutely fantastic for the club. But also our visitors from HAS, Aberdeen Astronomical Society, Caithness, and North Ronaldsea. We did invite Dundee as well. I don't know if there's any Dundee members here, but I know they've got an event on up at the Mills Observatory tonight, so I don't think they'll be able to join us. So yeah, but it's a very special welcome to all the new members as well. Okay, just before we start, a little reminder about your subs. They're obviously due for payment now. Membership runs from January to December. There's information on how to pay your subs in the newsletter. Preferable method to do that is a bank transfer if you can. I know some of you are thinking of playing in the next physical meeting, but if you could pay by bank transfer prior to that, it would be helpful. So our next meeting isn't until April. That way it helps us to balance the books a little bit better, and also keeps us on the right side of the GDPR. But obviously if you can't do it, and then we'll happily take your money in April. Okay, on with the meeting tonight. So helping me in the background, I've got Rich and Mick. They're the co-hosts, the Zoom co-hosts. So if I suddenly drop out, I'm in on 2 items, so I should be fine tonight. But if I drop out, they'll take over and keep things running smoothly. Mick, you'll see him as well. He'll be in the second half doing the Moray Sky at night, showing you what's up in the nighttime sky. And also we got Chris, who's rushed in from his band practice to handle the questions and answer session at the end of the talk. So I'll just go over the Zoom controls. It's been a few weeks since we've done a Zoom. For anyone who hasn't used Zoom before, Chris is handling the sort of questions and answers to a mic. What I would ask you to do is to put any questions you have in the Q&A box. Don't put them in the chat. Reason being, the chat can move quite quickly and the questions can get lost, and it's a lot easier for Chris to monitor them in the Q&A. You'll see the Q&A button in the little toolbar, the Zoom toolbar at the bottom of your screen, or maybe at the top if you use Apple. Okay, if you have any issues at all, you'll see a little raise hand button. If you raise your hand, one of us here on the panel will see it's up, and we'll contact you through the chat to see what see what the problem is. But everyone should be quite well up and on how to use Zoom at the minute. So the meeting brief of how it works for those who haven't been before. Basically, we're going to have a main talk from Mike Frost tonight. Chris will be handling the questions and answers. Then we'll have a little 10-minute break just to give us time to reset for the second half. And then I'll be showing a few of the members' photos we've had come in over the past few weeks. Mick will then do the Moray Sky at night, and I'll just do a little bit of club news to finish the evening off. Okay. So our speaker tonight, some of you may have met him at the BAA meeting in Elgin back in September. He was up for that, and he said he thoroughly enjoyed it, and was one of the best attended he's been to for a while as well, he said. But Mike, Mike is a past president of the Coventry and Warwickshire Astronomical Society, a fellow of the Royal Astronomical Society, founder member of the Society for History of Astronomy, and the director of the history section of the BAA. He enjoys traveling the world to see astronomical sites, observatories, camera obscurers, meteor craters, and astronomical phenomena, meteor storms, the aurora borealis, and eclipses. His absolutely favorite thing to see, though, is total solar eclipses. He has been in the right place to do this, not necessarily with the right weather, and we've all been there, Mike. We know exactly how you feel with that. On no less than, I think it says 13 occasions, is that? Yep. 13. And he hopes to make it the 14th in Western Australia in April. He is one of the contributors to a cross-cultural book on solar eclipses, Eclipse and Revelation, sorry, I'll get that right in a minute, and which is due to be published by OUP probably in January 2024, I think you're saying, aren't you, Mike? So, Mike, thank you very, very much for coming along tonight. I'll hand over to you, and we'll sit back and enjoy your talk.
Thank you very much, Pete. Okay, so I will try and share the screen, and you should see my presentation from beginning now. Let's do that. Come on. Okay, Good.
Yep.
Yeah. So a couple of things before I get started. First of all, I did enjoy the meeting up in Elgin last year. Florence and I took our time overcoming. We drove up from England, so we came back with a whole load of boxes of stuff that people wanted us to take back down to section directors and archivists and so on. But we spent a few days in Stirling and then Aviemore and in Inverness and in Elgin, most of which I'd not previously been to. So Florence and I had a very good time, and we enjoyed the meeting as well. Tremendously good. One person regretfully didn't see then was John Rosenfield. So I saw him in the audience tonight. So hi, John. And John's an old friend of mine, a correspondent, and has spoken at our historical section meeting when we held one in Stirling a few years ago. And second, I will put in a further plug for the book that I'm working on, Eclipse and Revelation. The idea is to do a cross-cultural look at solar eclipses, just about every angle conceivable. We have on board animal behavioral people, meteorologists, medieval historians, art historians, theologians, you name it, there's probably somebody writing about it. And the editors, Henrika, I know I saw was in the audience tonight, and Tom. Tom's an old friend of mine, very old friend of mine, and what they wanted was to finish off was a nerd who'd seen lots of eclipses, and for some reason Tom thought of me. So thank you very much for that. We're having a great time putting it all together, and I hope some of you might be interested in the finished product when it comes out in about a year's time, hopefully. So, as you said in the introduction, I have so far seen 13 total eclipses, and I'm going to tell you the story of the 13th. And as you can see, it was not a normal travel, traveling to see the eclipse. So let me show you about the details of it. So this is what we see, the path of the eclipse of December 14th. 2020, and there I'll show you the diagram on the left-hand side. First of all, it's a picture of the Earth looking, as it were, from the moon, and you see a large grey circle crossing the southern horizon with a tiny little black dot in the middle of it. And the large grey circle is the area that sees a partial eclipse, and then the black dot, the important bit, is the tiny amount of the Earth's surface that actually sees a total eclipse, where the moon totally covers the sun. And so you can see it's important to be in pretty much the right place at the right time. And you can see the eclipse started just after dawn in the middle of the Pacific, and it crossed the sort of barren area of the southeast Pacific. Didn't actually hit land until a mile or so before it hit the Chilean coast. It then crossed Chile and then through into Argentina, through the middle to the bottom part of Argentina, and then it left the Argentinian coast and didn't hit any further land at all, and the eclipse finished at sunset just to the west of Southwest Africa. So given that information from that dynamic picture on the left, the picture on the right perhaps makes a little bit more sense. It's how much you can see at any given location in South America at the maximum. So for example, somewhere like Montevideo, just above the S of greatest eclipse, saw about an 80% eclipse. Peru saw about 20% or so. The Antarctic Peninsula 20 to 40%, and the South Pole didn't see an eclipse. And you can see that actually South America was a pretty good place to be, because it was the greatest eclipse, because that's pretty much the point on the totality track that was nearest the moon, and it's also in the middle of the day, so the sun is very high in the sky. So all these things are pretty good for having a good eclipse. And it also happened to be where we were, where the weather was best along the land totality track. So everything was pretty much in our favor. The previous year, 2019, I've been to see another eclipse in Argentina. I rather like Argentina as a country. I've worked there quite a few weeks in the course of the last few years in my day job in engineering, but I also returned to see the eclipse from San Jose, which is in the northwest of Argentina, in the foothills of the Andes, rather further north than this particular eclipse. We had a beautiful eclipse from a llama farm in the foothills of the Andes, finishing with a partially eclipsed sun setting down into the mountains. Fantastic backdrop. And the next day we flew across the Andes and landed in Santiago, the Chilean capital, and spent 2 or 3 days in Chile, which I'd not previously been to, and which I know to be a beautiful country. And indeed, I enjoyed my time there. So almost immediately I got back from this trip, I booked another one with the same company, Astrotrails, booking an Astrotrails Tour X to Chile to see the eclipse from Chile. And then a few months later, in January 2020, I was approached by quite a few people. A lot of my friends are the guest astronomers on these sorts of trips, and they knew that I was quite keen to do a little bit of being a guest astronomer myself. And so it was agreed that I'd be one of the guest astronomers on the many trips. They had about 10 or 12 planned, and I was immensely looking forward to doing this. Unfortunately, in January 2020, there were rumors of a little bit of a pandemic coming out of Wuhan in China. And by March 2020, well, things had really kicked off. You know what happened next. And so by the summer of 2020, as Northern Hemisphere summer, pretty much the world had shut down completely. There didn't seem to be any international travel at all, and our hopes of actually doing a trip of any sort began to dim. And quite a few tour companies, both in Britain and in the United States, actually cancelled their tours. But Astrotrails are made of sterner stuff. They have a lot of expertise with this, and in particular, they have excellent local agents. And in our case, we had Eurotour, who are an Argentinian company, and Eurotour began negotiating with the governments in Argentina and Chile in case there was any signs of travel reopening up. And in October 2020, Argentina started to think about restarting tourism. And Eurotour put to them quite a nice idea, which was we were going to be, we were actually the first foreign tourists into Argentina in 6 months or so, that we could try and travel like a bubble, like a sports team. Some international sporting events went on, and they would travel in a group, not interact with local people as much as possible, and that was what we proposed to do for our tour here. And I think there was the additional thing that, first of all, there weren't going to be too many of us. Yeah, I mean, usually you get thousands, but in this case there were hundreds, and it turned out to be dozens of people coming, and who were scientifically literate, understood the risks that were being taken, and weren't going to do really silly things. So they put that to the Argentinian authorities, and eventually the Argentina agreed for 94 people to come into Argentina to see the eclipse. Astrotrails took up 45 of those 94 places. I think another tour company in America, Sirius Travel out of Colorado, sent a dozen or so people, and we met some people from Bangor University in Wales who were there for scientific reasons, and they'd also managed to get some of these visas, but really not too many more. I'm not even sure that they managed to get the 94 open. So I was asked to switch the tour to Argentina. In November 2020, Chile began to negotiate, so I was asked to switch back to the Chilean tour, but by this stage, anybody who was going to go had signed up for the Argentina tour. So in the end, we ran 2 tours to Argentina with myself and Nick James, who some of you might remember from Elgin, the BAA Comments section director, as the 2 guest astronomers. You can imagine the bureaucracy that we had to go through to be able to satisfy both the NHS and the Argentinian version of the NHS. These are some of the things that we had to do. You don't have to read them all the way through. I'm not giving a test on the end, just to give you some idea of the quite overwhelming bureaucracy. Tests that we had to do absolutely everywhere. Permits to enter Argentina, permits to travel between states in Argentina, which most people couldn't do at the time. Track and trace apps, both in the UK and Argentina. In the middle of Argentina, my NHS app sent me a text to say that he couldn't find anybody within 10 miles to do track and trace against. So that was good. All the various protocols, mask wearing compulsory in public, temperature readings. Every time we got on the tour bus, you had to have your temperature taken and your hands sanitized. All these very sensible things to do. Perhaps overkill, but that's better than coming down with COVID. We were very, very, very nervous to do all these things. But anyway, that's the way it was. The number 4 on the list, negative PCR COVID test within 72 hours of travel to Argentina. So I had to do that. I had to travel up to Leicester. so, just about 20 miles or so from my house at the time, to take a PCR test. And I did this 72 hours beforehand and waited for the results and waited and waited and waited. I went to sleep hoping that something would arrive. At 1:30 in the morning of the day I was due to travel, I received a text on my mobile phone, which is in the other room from my bedroom. Unfortunately, it woke me up. And what the text said was, "Dear Michael, there is a problem with your COVID test. We need to repeat it at 8 a.m. in the morning." Had I turned over and gone back to sleep, I suspect I might have missed that text altogether, and perhaps that would have ruined the entire trip for me. But as it was, I was able to get myself back up to Leicester, redo the test. Quite a stressful day waiting for the test results to arrive and get myself ready, but it all worked out. And that evening, I drove down to Heathrow. I left my car in airport parking, and from that moment onwards for the next 17 hours, I wore a mask continuously. Heathrow was as empty as it will ever be. I suspect it'll never be quite so quiet again. However, not too many flights, of course, but there were flights to Buenos Aires, and they were packed because people wanted to go home for Christmas. That the flights had restarted, and so there were a lot of people who were in Britain and wanted to go to Argentina. So having been absolutely nowhere near anybody for 6 months, I was squeezed between two complete strangers in an airplane. Very, very, very surreal. But we got there and got to the airport and managed to meet up with everybody. There's some quite stressful journeys, I think, from the US. Plane companies had helpfully decided that as people couldn't get into Argentina, there was no point in allowing them to fly to Miami, where the American flights departed from, or some of the American flights departed from. So people found their connecting flights being cancelled, even though they knew they could fly. All these sorts of things, these rather stressful things of traveling during a pandemic. But we got there. We got everybody into Argentina through the first level of the bureaucracy, through the first set of PCR tests. And there we were in our hotel in Buenos Aires. I know Buenos Aires quite well because, as I say, I traveled to San Nicolas de los Arroyos, about 100 miles west of Argentina, to the steelworks there where I do my engineering job. And this is the bit we stayed in to begin with, in the Retiro area. Retiro is the main station for Buenos Aires. And when you come out of that station, you see in front of you a rather nice, elegant brick tower. And if you take a close look at what it says on the brick tower, it says Dieu et mon droit. It's actually the British coat of arms, because this used to be the Playa Inglese, the English square, in tribute to the many people from Britain who came to Argentina to either to emigrate or to build the railways or to teach them how to play football. And this was how it was. The Argentinians were great Anglophiles for a very long time, until 1982, of course, when we fought a rather senseless war against them for control of the Falklands, as we call it, or the Malvinas, as they call it. And it was hastily renamed at that point, but they didn't take down the rather nice crest of the British government. So rather a pity. I find the Argentinians are still Anglophile. They haven't forgotten the Malvinas War to the extent that we have, but it's they are still Anglophile people. You can see in the background my hotel in Buenos Aires, the Sheraton, very big multinational hotel, not very full because people weren't traveling. Well, from my room at the back, you could look out over the port of Buenos Aires. Buenos Aires is a port, and it's a freshwater port. That might look like the sea out there, but actually it's the huge estuary of the Parana and the River Plate. The Parana is one of the biggest rivers in South America, second only to the Amazon. And you can see the boats that go across the estuary to Montevideo in Uruguay, which I've never been, but so I think it's about 2 or 3 hour trip on a hydrofoil. And then on the left, that greyish building right on the left-hand side is the Ministry of Works, which I'm all too familiar with because when I'm working there, that's where I get taken to sign various affidavits so they can give me a work permit. So we all arrived in Buenos Aires. We all did our tests, and the tour company had arranged to say, well, once they're in Argentina, can we give them a city tour? And the answer was yes, provided you take precautions like don't go inside anywhere. And so we said, yeah, okay, we'll do that. We had an outdoor meal. We didn't go in. The only building we went inside is the cathedral, which is nice and ventilated and so on. And we managed to do a city tour in a quite good city tour without any risks risks to ourselves or to anybody else. And we started off in the Plaza Mayor, the major square in the heart of Buenos Aires. And this is the Pink Palace, the Casa Rosada, the presidential palace. And up at the top there is the balcony from which Evita sang "Don't Cry for Me, Argentina." Or at least she did in the musical. And I can assure you, because I've been here 2 or 3 times, this place is normally packed out with tourists. Everybody wants to come and see the Castle Rosada. But when we were there, it was pretty much empty. And I mean, I've never seen it quite so empty as that. Almost nobody there. The only people who were there were, well, 1 or 2 people who were strolling past our tour group and the union people protesting. So even if there's a pandemic on, they'll still get people wanting to destroy us the capitalismo, which I think my Spanish is not good, but I think we know what that means. And good, fair play on them, because I mean, if one good thing came out of the Falklands War in '82, it was the fall of the Galtieri's brutal junta, and anybody in 1981 who'd put up something like that would probably have been taken away by the police and never seen again. So they value their right to protest, and who's going to stop them? We took a look at 1 or 2 other places, but the next place we fetched up that I'm going to show you is a suburb that I'd not actually been to previously, which is La Boca. And I know La Boca for exactly one thing, which is the home of the football club of Boca Juniors. And it was explained to me by an Argentinian football fan that Boca Juniors are the Argentinian equivalent of Manchester United. They're the default club. They're the club that you support if you don't support anybody else. And I kind of didn't really understand that, because I come from Manchester and I am a Manchester United supporter. So I was born 3 miles from the ground. So that didn't quite apply to me, but I was really pleased to see a 7-story mural of one of the few people who has played for both Manchester United and for Boca Juniors on the right-hand side there. If you don't recognize him, his name is Carlos Tevez. He played in England for 1 or 2 clubs, including another Manchester club whose name will not pass my lips, but a very, very good player. However, not the best ever to play for Boca Juniors. That would be Diego Maradona. Well, along with Lionel Messi, certainly one of the great footballers of all time. And Maradona had actually died a few weeks previously. And as we went past the Boca Juniors stadium, there was a rather touching, lots and lots of flowers, lots and lots of memorials to him. But that was the point at which my camera chose to give up, so I haven't got pictures of that. Now, in Britain, football suburbs, Old Trafford is really not the nicest part of Manchester. Villa is certainly, Aston is certainly not the nicest bit of Birmingham. But so I wasn't sure quite what La Boca would be like. But actually, it's quite a nice bohemian neighborhood. So lots of arts and crafts and very colorfully painted houses all over the place. So we had a little tour around the back streets of La Boca. And one of the music things is we got to the craft stalls and so on, and people would look up sharply because they heard English being spoken for the first time in 6 months. Foreign tourists, ka-ching! Finally, another opportunity to make some money off visitors. So everybody was very, very pleased to see us. This is my group. These are the people I was a guest astronomer for mostly American on the right-hand side, and mostly European on the left-hand side. It's pretty even split, and it's not like we were all arguing with each other. That's just the way it turned out with this particular photograph. Philippe Lopez on the right is French but lives in San Francisco. Michael and Denise Rice beyond that. Michael gets the award for the best job. He's script editor on The Simpsons. I mean, what more do I need to say? Letitia Ferre from Texas has written an excellent book about past Texas eclipses and the upcoming eclipse of 2024. Adam Rosenberg from Arizona, Kis Chotas from Tennessee, Ken Green, I can't remember where he's from, but somewhere in America. Andreas Moller, you'll see Philippe's excellent pictures later on, and you'll see Andreas Muller's fantastic pictures. They both allowed me to use their pictures in the presentation. Henrik Klotchik is an old friend of mine. Quentin Stevens, Neil Barabbas, Paul Cox, and Reinhold Ringhofer from Austria. So a small group of dedicated eclipse chasers. Everybody there has seen an eclipse before. We were described as the diehards, the people who were going to go and see an eclipse regardless. And there's another picture of us, and we're joined by one chap who didn't make the previous picture in the very dapper yellow trousers, Shane Washington from Kentucky. And this is in the parks in Buenos Aires. Behind you is a sculpture, a kinematic sculpture, which is supposed to open up like a flower for the light, but like everything else during the pandemic period, wasn't really working properly, and it never really opened up. Now, if you were to say one thing about Buenos Aires, it's a very elegant city, but if you were to play word association with it, I suspect most people would say tango dancing. You go to Buenos Aires and you go to a tango evening and you watch the beautiful people doing elegant tango dancing in a smoky club or over a meal or whatever, and this simply wasn't possible during the pandemic. So the tango dancers became tango buskers. So in Recoleta, we came across this couple here. Let me know if the sound doesn't play. We played it beforehand. So. So it was nice to see a little bit of tango dancing, even during the pandemic, even whilst we were in Buenos Aires. Got to the end of their dance, and we all put some money in the hat, of course we did. And then the young lady said, would anybody like to dance a tango with me? Well, I don't know about you, but it's always been on my bucket list to dance a tango with a beautiful Argentinian lady. However, if there are two phrases that do not go together very well, it is tango dancing and social distancing. And as the guest astronomer and the sort of lead for the party, I felt it was my responsibility to set a good example. So I declined, but I looked the other way as a couple of our Eclipse chasers did dance their tango with the beautiful lady, as I would love to have done. Maybe next time I'm in Argentina. Just want to show you a couple of things on there. Let me just go back to there. You see, Recoleta is where this is, and it's again a nice bit of Buenos Aires. Do go there if you're ever in the city. You see Atlas in the background, bearing the tree. It's that sort of sentiment to the place. On the left, you can see the lady sitting at the cafe, and the cafe is a memorial to Juan Manuel Fangio, the great Argentinian racing driver, and there's a fiberglass statue of him, so you can go and sit have a cup of coffee with Juan Manuel Fangio. But the best part about Recoleta, and I think it's my favorite part of Buenos Aires, you can just see in the background on the right-hand side, which is the cemetery, literally a city of the dead, just a half a mile in either direction, of tombs of the great and good. Hundreds of tombs of people, very important people who you've never heard of, plus Evita. And it's her tomb that has all the visitors, hundreds and hundreds of visitors, and always fresh flowers on her grave. And unfortunately, the Recoleta Cemetery was closed because of the pandemic. But I've been a couple of times before, and again, ever in Buenos Aires, that's certainly somewhere you should try going. So Buenos Aires was definitely not as open as it was previously, but at least they were trying to keep going as a city. But you weren't allowed to travel or anything like that. So for the next stage of our journey, we had to show all the forms that allowed us to go between states. So let me show you where we're going next. We're going south into Patagonia, but actually not very south. I don't know about you, but when you say Patagonia, I always think of the very bottom of South America, the Cape Horn and everything else. But actually what's considered Patagonia by the Argentinians and the Chileans extends for several hundred miles to the north. And I don't know if you can see there, but Buenos Aires is only a little bit further north than the top of Patagonia. The two places that we went to, my tour went to Neuquén, which is in the middle there, which is the largest city in Patagonia, which is not to say it's very big. It's probably on about 100,000 or so. Same size as Inverness, something like that. And the other group with Nick James went to San Carlos de Bariloche, to about 100 miles or so to the southwest of Neuquén. This is a tourist resort in the foothills of the Andes. It's got mountains and it's got lakes and so on. So the other two people from Astrotours, Julie, who owns the company, and Brian McGee, who used to own the company and is now a consultant. I was expecting one of them to travel with me and one of them to travel with Nick, but they said, oh, no, Bariloche is much nicer than Neuquén. We're all going there. So left me in charge of my group. And I said, well, what happens if there's nobody at the other end when we get off the plane? Don't worry, they said. Eurotour will sort you out. And indeed, Eurotour tour were brilliant. I didn't have to practice my non-existent Spanish to try and get us to a hotel or anything like that. And you can see, I mean, I've seen pictures of Bariloche and it looks a beautiful place, but Neuquén was a perfectly okay place to spend a day or two. Very nice swimming pool. You'll see it's a nice riverside location. I wouldn't say it was spectacularly beautiful, but perfectly good. So that's where we got to the day before the eclipse. And this was our trip on Eclipse Day. And you can see as we go through Neuquén province, the top of Patagonia, that it is scrub, quite arid, undulating land with the the first foothills of the Andes visible 100 miles or so in the distance. Not particular. I mean, you get some cattle on there, but it's mostly grazing, ranch cattle, that sort of thing. But there are rivers across this area, and where there is water, there is life. So this was where we're going to watch our eclipse from, the Fort in Nogueira, and you can see at the bottom of the hill there is a stream coming through and very lush pastures and so on. So barren at the top of the hill, but going down towards the river. There are two groups. There's our group higher up the stream, and then a larger group of Argentinian eclipse chasers who we didn't meet further down towards the river. And this was our eclipse viewing site, mooted. You can see the chains down the middle to separate out the two eclipse groups. That didn't really work. And bales of hay for us to set up all our stuff. So we put our stuff on the bales of hay and started figuring out what was going to happen. And what I always do when I get to an eclipse site is record a video. So here's the first part, at least, of the video that I recorded. This is our observatory. Well, satellite eclipse. You can see it's a beautiful sunny day. Because you can't hear a word I'm saying, because it's so windy. It's bluster, was unrelenting blustery wind. I think it comes down off the mountains. So when it is windy, it's just windy all day and it's not going to stop. We were talking about this before we went live, is that I think some days it's calm and it's not windy and so on. And I think they probably put all the bales of straw out on such a day. But when it's actually a windy day, there's not really a lot to stop the winds coming from the Andes going straight across Patagonia, and everything in its path will be windy. It really was blustery, and there is no way that we could have set up the telescopes and cameras that we needed to do. You can see how blustery it was. This is the worst ever episode of Doctor Who. The portaloos that we'd put up, one of them had already been blown into the stream, and though fortunately there was nobody inside it at the time. But you can see, I mean, if it's going to do that to a portaloo, what it's going to do to people's cameras and so on. So being the first group there, we reconnoitered a little bit and discovered just across the stream in the meadows were these rather more sheltered areas where the horses were grazing. This was an estancia, which is a horse ranch. That was the main thing that they grew there, with horses. And the horse, we asked, oh, is it okay if we set up here instead? And they said, sure. And we said, what about the horses? So oh, they'll clear out your way. And indeed they did. We saw them looking on from the next field beyond. But this turned out to be much better location. Only problem being that getting across the stream, that was the only way across the stream. So as a good guest astronomer, I sort of stood in the muddy bit and made sure everybody got across safely without falling over. And then the gauchos arrived and built us a wooden bridge to get back across. And so that's problem solved. And we set up our new location. And here's my video from our second location. Let's go with that.
So you might have seen my previous video on the site that was originally set up with us with the straw bales. That was so windy that the images weren't going to be able to do anything from there. We reconnoitered around a little bit, crossed the stream on a really narrow bridge, and we found this site about 200 meters or so away, a lot more sheltered. See, the wind is still moving the trees, but we're in the shadow of the trees, and it's very calm here down on the ground. Plus, the sun's going to be so high in the sky, these are not going to get in the way at all when the eclipse is actually happening. It's going to be 70 degrees high. So this is now where we're going. The only minor issue might be horse poo and animal jaw bones and so on down on the ground. See them scattered around all over the place. But I think we can cope with that. This is a very nice location to see our eclipse from. So I think this is where we're going to be.
So the other tour group arrived and set up, and everybody was happy, and we waited till the eclipse began. And we did all the normal things that one does during eclipse. I got out my old trusty colander, plastic colander from my kitchen, so that it shows those are not they're not crescent-shaped holes in the colander. That is the eclipse sun projected through all the holes on the colander. And if you're not convinced by that, to cross your fingers, and you see the gaps between the fingers. They also project a crescent-shaped shadows, crescent-shaped holes in the as the sun gets more and more eclipsed. The other thing I'd note there is people had differing attitudes as to what they want to do for by way of COVID safety. Most of us wore masks so as not to pass anything on. Liz on the left is wearing a full mask, which she took off as it got towards eclipse time. But other people didn't worry about masks, and it was up to people to try out. Midori on my right there was the only person who had not previously seen an eclipse in the entire 45. She'd come with her husband Jaswant and their son Aditya, who I knew from previous eclipses. Really nice people, and so usually we have a few eclipse virgins, as we call them, but this occasion only Midori. So we're getting towards eclipse time now. Now, a little explanation. I always film the last 2 minutes or so before a totality happens, if only to show how overexcited I get during this period here. And I'm going to show you a bit of it. It wasn't really very good because I'm trying to be both the eclipse master of ceremonies and watch everything and try and film everything and so on. It doesn't really. There's more horse poo than you really want to. You'd really want in a video. What I get really excited about in the 2 minutes before totality are shadow bands. These are very low contrast light and dark that go across surfaces. They're due essentially to the sun twinkling, and the sun it twinkles all the time like any other star, but it's so big that you don't notice it. But when only the tiniest portion of the sun is uncovered by the moon, then there's a chance that you might see these things. What you really need is a nice white surface, and you'll notice horse poo is not particularly white, but we put a white sheet just above where this is to try and look out for them. And I always get very excited because I can always see these shadow bands, or at least I think I can, and they just don't show up on video at all. And I've done enough of these videos to know that this is the case. However, about 45 seconds or so in, you will see some sort of shadow if you look very carefully going across. I'm not sure those are shadow bands. They're far too big and far too sweeping. I think they're more like the shadows you get from clouds on a sort of scuddy cloud day, where you see shadows of clouds racing across the ground. I think that's what's happening, and I think that's more acute when most of the sun is covered up. You'll also see Liz O'Mara wandering around with a patch over her eye. She isn't a pirate. She's got one eye covered, so to darken up the eye that she's going to do the observing with. So that's why this is. So I'll play you about 45 seconds worth of this. It just gets more and more silly after that point. So let's see what happens here. So.
I may have to take off this time.
Okay, so we have 2 minutes to go. Well, as usual, I think I can see shadow bands on there, but they probably won't come out on the video. So very dark.
I need a lot better shadow.
Yes, I'm sorry.
To make it count.
Sorry, Liz.
You can see some cloud around.
Right across the ground. Look at those.
Oh my God!
Look at. Is that good enough for you, Liz?
See it any second now. Bands sweeping across the ground. Can you see them? Anyway, I'll stop at that point. It doesn't get more exciting than that. There's a lot more horse poo before it ends. What I did instead, for the first time actually, because I'd acquired my first iPhone, was just switch on my iPhone and just leave it observing the sun. So I'm going to play this one, only I'm going to move it forward to just before the eclipse starts, because I just wanted to leave it. And what you can see, let's get it to about 2:30 and leave it there. Okay, so we're now about 45 seconds before totality starts. With an iPhone, you don't get a particularly detailed view of the sun, but you do get a feel for, first of all, how small it is, and also the general thing in the sky. And you can see that as totality came on us, so did a piece of cloud, which is not good. We really don't want cloud when there's eclipses happening. But can you see those beautiful halos, those rings of light around the eclipse sun? Those were genuine, and I'll show you a picture of those shortly. And so we're about to go into totality now. Watch for the dimmer switch going off. Whoomp, and we're into totality at that point there. And at that moment, the iPhone, that little dot on the left-hand side of the screen is not a hot pixel, it's Venus, which I just managed to capture on the left-hand side here. So we're now into totality, and we're waiting with bated breath for the sun to emerge from the clouds, and we're confident it will happen because the clouds are moving pretty quickly. And so here comes the sun, as George Harrison might say, coming out. Everybody is very happy now. We can start taking pictures. And as somebody, possibly me, pointed out, that little dot just to the left-hand side of the eclipse sun is Mercury. Could you see? I think the little black things are birds thinking whether or not they're going to roost, flying through the field of vision. The horses were nonplussed about the whole thing. They weren't quite sure what was going on. So as far as I know, they didn't do anything. But you can see the eclipse lasted for us, I think it was 2 minutes and 8 seconds. And for most of that period, we had clear skies. The first 20 seconds or so, there was light cloud through which you could see through the eclipse sun. And then a tiny little bit more of very, very light cloud crossed us about a minute and a half in. That's joining here, and we will see. I don't tend to take photographs. I tend to look around at the horizon and the skies. The grand conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter was just you remember December of 2020. Most people saw it just immediately after sunset because they weren't too far from the sun. Well, we saw it in the middle of the day. Rather beautiful it was too. Those are the other two major things visible in the sky. So I think we've got about 30-40 seconds worth of totality still to go on here. Again, it give you any idea as to how beautiful and subtle the solar corona is, but it gives you some idea what it looked like to the naked eye in the sky. I think we're probably about 10-15 seconds off. Now we'll see the diamond ring emerging in a second, and here's the end of the eclipse, and there we go. You see how much brighter even the tiniest portion of the sun actually is. And the final cloud arrives, but we don't really care at this point because our total eclipse is over. And that's, I wasn't sure what I get on my iPhone, but I mean, iPhones are extraordinary things, and you get the most beautiful shots out of them. I really like them. I hope you do too. So let's move on. So I promised you a few things. This was, first of all, the beautiful rings of light around the last, as the cloud covered the last portions of the partial eclipse when almost the whole of the sun was covered, and then during totality. And they are a meteorological phenomenon. They're an interference effect from the light from the sun and from the solar corona hitting the droplets in that cloud. They're called halos. Meteorological halos. Sorry, they're not. They're called coronas, meteorological corona. So that is a meteorological corona at the same time as a solar corona, which is in the sun, obviously, and in the year of the coronavirus. And so you can guess what beer we drank. It's beautiful, beautiful sight. I mean, I don't generally approve of there being cloud around during a total eclipse. It's the kind of thing you curse at mostly. But it was so light, and we knew it was going to go away, and it produced the most beautiful effects. Of which was the beautiful meteorological corona, a diffraction effect from light from the sun going through the tiny water droplets in the cloud. Not the only thing that we saw on the cloud. I promised you shadow bands earlier, and we didn't see that many shadow bands on the ground. And if we did, they may have been cloud bands, I think, rather than shadow bands. But what we did see instead were some shadow bands projected onto the cloud. Okay, so this is variations of light and dark, and they're running. This is you can see Andy Muller's still picture of them, and then Nick James's video of them. And what I'm looking at are these sort of straight lines heading towards about 2 o'clock on the cloud. You can see they're low contrast. You've got to kind of squint to look at them. They're a little bit more obvious when we play the video. So let me play you Nick James's video of the 30 or so seconds leading up to the eclipse. Okay, so you've got bleeding of the light. There's too much sunlight onto his lens. That's why it's going up. There's a diagonal light there, but you can see the last rays of light, the Bailey's beads, and then the diamond ring going into the eclipse. And now you can see these. Can you see them heading towards about 2 o'clock around the sun, about to solar diameter in each direction, vertical lines going across the cloud. And I think is showing you they're sort of parallel to the light of the sun. I'm trying to think out loud now, but anyway, they are projections of light and dark for the shadow bands, the sun twinkling. And you can see they've gone in the last 5 seconds or so before the totality actually starts. So I think you need a linear type effect being projected onto the clouds by the turbulent air that's above that would normally cause twinkling. That's what my understanding of the way that shadow bands work. And so now you see totality itself has started, and the beautiful pearly white corona around the sun. I will show you around the eclipse sun, show you much better pictures of that. But Nick also took pictures of this is the inner corona, when you can begin to see some of the structure of the things. And then the prominences, the eruptions, essentially from sunspots out into the solar atmosphere. They form arches and then they loop back down and hit back into the sun, but they persist for periods of hours. And so you can see them there. And there are 4 groups: one at 2 o'clock, one at about 5 o'clock, one at about 10 o'clock, and one about 7:30, 8 o'clock on the sun. You also see the red glow, the chromosphere, the very lowest layer of the solar atmosphere, between about 3 o'clock and 5 o'clock. When you're coming out of an eclipse, when you see the chromosphere, that's the time to put your binoculars down, because you dare not look. You will blind yourself if you actually look at the uneclipsed sun through any sort of magnification. Safe during those 2 minutes of totality, but so that's why I always put my binoculars down early. And then the corona itself, and you're beginning to see some more of the beautiful detail of the corona itself. It's extraordinarily subtle, subtle thing to see. And Nick, Nick saw a lot of things through his scope and took a lot of pictures. I think he got a bit frustrated that there was still some residual breeze. Said that some of his images showed a sort of rumba type effect as the telescope wobbled, which is quite appropriate for Argentina, of course, but not when you try to do astronomical imaging. Andreas Muller, on the other hand, took this picture here. I would contend, and I'm not the only one, that this is possibly the best eclipse photograph ever taken. This is just superb, just fantastic. Andres is from Berlin, a German photographer, visited many eclipses, and he handed over the image for processing to possibly the best eclipse image processor in the world, the Czech astronomer Miroslav Druckmüller. Miroslav couldn't make it to the eclipse, but he took the best images of some of the people who were there and produced wonderful things. The amount of detail that he has produced there, it's just staggering. To try and take you through some of it. First of all, on the moon, you can see there is detail on the moon. You look at the moon during a total eclipse and it appears to be velvet black. Well, it is to the eye, but it isn't necessarily. And you might think, well, what's illuminating it? The sun's on the other side of the moon. By definition, it's an eclipse. Well, not all of the Earth sees a total eclipse. So there is some Earth shine. Sunlight reflected off the Earth comes back and illuminates very dimly the side of the moon that's facing us. And if you process the image enough, you can bring out some of that detail. If you look down at the bottom left-hand side, there are the stars all around the images, pinpoint mostly, but you see one at about 7 o'clock towards the edge, which has got a little trail behind it. That's not an image artifact. That's not a flaw in the picture. That's a comet. There was a sun-grazing comet that we knew would be very close to the sun during the eclipse, and Andreas Muller's image picked that up. The second one was discovered, I don't think it's on this image here, but Nick James, who's the Comet Section Director, so interested in these things, he managed to image both of them, and we think that is the first time that two comets have been imaged during totality. Occasionally comets have been seen during totality, and we knew we'd get one, but not two until at least the day beforehand. You can see the prominences as well. Those little licks of red from Nick James's picture, you can see they're all in place, and you can see how it connects with the structure of the solar corona, the outer atmosphere of the sun. That the prominences are all surrounded by little loops, so it's all to do with the sun's magnetic field and how that rises with the prominences, and above that is going into the corona. And you can see towards the poles at about 11:30 and about 5:30, you get these fantastic polar brushes. These are the magnetic field lines of the sun sprouting from each of the two magnetic poles, and beautiful they are too. And then the more chaotic structure of the solar corona, this is the atmosphere of the sun with the magnetic field lines entwined with it, stirred up essentially by the rotation of the sun, and taking a little bit more chaotic feature though. So each eclipse is different. Different times during the solar cycle, when there's more and less activity, you get different ones, different types of corona. And towards the right, you can see these beautiful coronal streamers extending off for several solar radii out into the solar system, and fantastic and beautiful they are too. But I'm kind of teasing you because the really obvious feature, which you've all noticed, which I haven't mentioned yet, is at about 8 o'clock, is that large loop in the corona itself with all that fine, dusty, cloudy detail almost, and that is a coronal mass ejection. This is an explosion of material, a huge explosion of material from the sun out into outer space. And we just happened to be, there happened to be one in progress when the eclipse happened. Now, there weren't too many images around because people just couldn't get to the center line. There were some Argentinians, and there were 94 people who managed to get visas. But somebody else who did manage to get into Argentina, I think because he lived there, but he managed to get to the right place to see the eclipse, was Dario Harari, who was on the Argentinian coast. So totality for him arrived about 13 minutes later than it did for us. And Miroslav took the pictures of Andres Moller and Dario Harari and sorted out the explosions and so on, and managed to put the two together as a movie. And again, there's that very obvious feature on the left-hand side. There is the expanding coronal mass ejection. This is something that is moving fast. The sun is about 300,000 miles across, and in the course of 13 minutes between 1609 UTC and 1622, it's moved, yeah, maybe a quarter of a solar diameter, something like that. These are fast. These are going hundreds of thousands of miles an hour, up to 100,000 or so miles an hour. Yeah, that's in fact more, hundreds of thousands of miles an hour. I'll stick with what I originally said. And so they dissipate pretty quickly. It takes about 2 hours thereabouts for a coronal mass ejection to dissipate completely through the corona. And the coronal mass ejections are not particularly rare. If they come in our direction, it's the kind of thing that will cause chaos for satellites and so on. They shut themselves down when it arrives. But this one obviously was going off to the left. Coronal mass ejections happen about once every 72 hours, once every 3 days or so. So it lasts for 2 hours, 72 hours time. Means there's about a 1 in 36 chance that a coronal mass ejection will be taking place during an eclipse of the sun. But it's worse than that, because if the coronal mass ejection is heading in our direction, we won't see it because the moon's in the way. And if it's headed away from the sun in the opposite direction, we won't see it because the moon and the sun are in the way. So only about half coronal mass ejections that occur during eclipses are actually going to be visible. So you've got about a 1 in 72 chance of seeing a coronal mass ejection during any given total eclipse where you can see the sun. And total eclipses of the sun happen about once every 18 months, about once every year and a half or so. So 72 times 1.5 is 108. So you would expect to see a coronal mass ejection of during a solar eclipse about once a century. Pretty rare. It's the first time I've ever seen it, certainly, and this was my 13th eclipse. and we've been watching eclipse of the sun seriously since about the middle of the 19th century. Didn't see all of them in the Victorian era because they're just too remote and so on. But you know, in 180 years, you might expect to see that we'd seen another coronal mass ejection in progress during a total eclipse, and indeed that is the case. There might have been one in the 70s. One, two people think it is. I'm not convinced, but definitely there was one in 1860 when an eclipse of the sun crossed Spain, and Mike Lockwood and Matthew Owens did a rather interesting paper in the RAS's House Journal, Astronomy and Geophysics, where they got all these drawings. Photography was not in a good enough state to be able to take good pictures of the sun. I think Delarue took the first picture of an eclipse in this particular eclipse, but he did actually capturing the fine details of the corona, eluded them. But we had instead some very skillful solar drawers, and you can see that many of them figured out there was something odd with the sun that time round, and drew some sort of feature at about 4 o'clock on there, which I'm absolutely certain was a coronal mass ejection in progress. And in particular, I would draw your attention to the middle, the left-hand side in the middle, Mr. Wilson, James Wilson. He was a schoolmaster at Rugby School. He lived in the same town that I do. I'm from Rugby, although which is near Coventry, near Coventry, Warwickshire. So there have been two total eclipses of the sun with coronal mass ejections in progress, and there has been a Rugby astronomer at both of them. We're 2 from 2 at the moment, and I hope long may it stay that way. That was an absolute bonus. We didn't know it was going to happen. As you can see from Andreas Muller's staggeringly beautiful picture, it really was really rather beautiful. What else have we got to say? Oh yeah, Philippe Lopez, also a world-class imager. How about that for a picture? So this is showing he's taken multiple exposures of the eclipsed sun, and he's put them all on top of each other, so you can see, or nearly eclipsed sun, you can see the Bailey's beads on the left-hand side gradually diminishing until you go into the eclipse, and then come out of the eclipse with the diamond ring and the Bailey's beads on the right-hand side, and you see all the prominences as well, that you can see that they persist. They don't very change through the 2 minutes or so of the eclipse. Philippe does things slightly differently. I roomed with him on the previous eclipse, and he's a very quiet lad. He just separates himself from everybody else, from the hullabaloo. I really like being with other people during eclipses. I find it very sociable, but Philippe finds himself a quiet little corner and takes his wonderful pictures. And in particular, he put himself by the stream, and there's this beautiful picture, Argentinian backdrop with eclipse in the sky. I think that just captures everything. It's like my iPhone sequence, only rather better. Yeah, he's got the idyllic pastoral nature of where we were in the Estancia. He's got the clouds in the sky, conveyed the fact that yes, they got in the way a little bit, but not catastrophically. He's got the partial phases of the eclipse, and then in the middle of it all, the eclipsed sun. And then something I watched out for, but Philip captured on film again, is the sunset down there, the orange glow on the horizon, just like a sunset. But of course, there is no sun setting. The sun is up there in the sky. So you're seeing light that is from the area where there isn't a total eclipse, because it's diminished, I think you're getting reddening from the air that is there. And it's a similar effect, sort of, but it's an all-round sunset. If you were able to swivel around in all directions, which we weren't really here, you'd probably see something in all directions from the site there. You get the most extraordinarily gorgeous meteorological effects during eclipses. It's a time like no other. So we had, against all the odds, a really successful eclipse, and even the bits that didn't go too well, like the cloud going in, actually generated wonderful things like that meteorological corona and the shadow bands projected onto the clouds. So yeah, there's a lot to be grateful for. And so we did what we normally did, which was break out the beers and celebrate. And the horses at this point realized that we weren't going to do them any harm, and they also realized that the seating was edible, and so they tucked into our seating. We didn't have anywhere to sit anymore, and you can see everybody was very happy, including the horses and the dogs. And the family that owned the estancia came up from the river. They'd observed with the Argentinian group and came up to see that we'd also enjoyed ourselves. I don't think you can get more Argentinian than that. I think the hats and the everything else, they are so clearly from Argentina. But again, Anglophiles. Mum spoke very good English, and they'd holidayed in England. The son and his missus, they had a young son of their own, disabled lad who drove around on his mobility scooter. Again, doesn't stop you watching the clips, so he had a whale of a time too. They had a great day. They were so pleased that we'd all managed to get there and all managed to see the eclipse from their beautiful farm. They were very happy. So we concluded the day at Fort in Nagoya with a socially distanced shot. That doesn't look very socially distanced, but be sure that we tried to make sure that everybody was distanced from everybody else. And if you look at the back, the chap in the orange on the right hand side, right at the back, Mike Crown, we barely saw him during the period here. He didn't go out on the day trip or anything like that. He was his choice to stay as isolated as possible, and I can't say I blame him. You know, there's an incurable disease going around. You may well want to take extreme precautions, and that's what Mike did. But he joined us for the photograph, standing a foot or two behind everybody else. So that was very good. And I think Chris Chotas has an Argentinian shirt on at that point. Not sure where he got that from. Anyway, so all went very well. Back to our hotel, and that evening we did stargazing in Argentina. Southern sky clusters, which don't normally see, the Crux cluster and Jewel Box and so on. Unfortunately, it wasn't particularly a dark sky site, but so we were limited to what we could see. But we did our best with the lights that were available to us, and we even saw a barn owl hunting, which I've never seen before in the grounds of the hotel, which was really rather neat. And we got ourselves back to Buenos Aires, and on our last night there, we asked very nicely, could we go out for a meal? And they found us a restaurant that had a separate room where we could all eat without interacting with anybody else. And I'd forgotten, not really forgotten, but I can assure you that Argentinian steak and chips and wine. What's the road is. It'll occur to me in a minute what the make is really rather excellent. It's the cuisine is not subtle, but it is extremely tasty, and that was a great way to finish off. And they all sang "So He's a Jolly Good Fellow" for me, which was very nice. They all departed the next day. I waited for the next group to arrive. I spent most of the day asleep, but we managed to get ourselves back on our planes back to England. Let me conclude, a couple of things to conclude with. First of all, I hope this has enthused you to go and see an eclipse of the sun. You should definitely go at least once in your life to go see a total eclipse of the sun. Rest assured, once you've seen one, you want to see another one. There's been one subsequently, December the 4th, 2021, conveniently located in Antarctica. I didn't get to see that one. They didn't need a guest astronomer. Astrotrails did do a cruise, which had their own apparently quite useless guest astronomer on board, but unfortunately it was clouded out. Andy Muller and Letitia Ferry and a couple of other people from my group actually flew to Union Glacier in the middle of Antarctica, where they for about £40,000, I think, you could fly there, spend a week there, and they saw a 40-second total eclipse from the runway at Union Glacier. But it looked pretty neat, I have to say, and they did all sorts of Antarctic things right in the middle of Antarctica, as opposed to visiting islands off the coast. The next eclipse of the sun is next year, April the 20th. I am a guest astronomer on one of the tours Astrotrails is organising there. It crosses, it just nips the surface. Malbec, that's the word I was looking for, the Argentinian wine. Steak and Malbec should be done. Australian eclipse clips the western coast of Australia, just one town, essentially, Exmouth, which has one hotel. So fortunately has an airstrip as well, so I think a lot of people will be flying in. But we're doing a coach tour up the western side of Australia. We're under canvas for the bits around Exmouth, which is the town that it crosses. But I've been to all the other Australian states, but never Western Australia, and apparently it is a beautiful part of the world. Crosses East Timor and Indonesia, some Indonesian islands as well, and I recommend Indonesia as well, beautiful place. April the 8th, 2024, goes across North America, through Mexico, Texas, up through the Great Lakes, quite a few places with steel towns that I've visited in my time in the USA, over Niagara Falls, through into Ontario, Quebec, and Nova Scotia, I think it is. So lots of places to see. I think Astrotrails will mostly be doing Mexico and possibly Texas, which is where the weather prospects are best. But eclipse over Niagara Niagara Falls, if the weather cooperates, would be very nice. 2026, we've got one in Europe. It goes through Greenland, just the western side of Iceland. I think Reykjavik sees total eclipse, through Spain, just to the north of Madrid, ending at sunset eclipse in Mallorca and Menorca. So some fantastic places to go there. If you like Spanish eclipses, there's another one the next year. It goes along the south coast of Spain, crosses Gibraltar, and then across the Mediterranean to North Africa. This is a biggie. This is the one I would recommend. 7 minutes of totality from the Valley of the Kings in Egypt. Julie, who runs Astrotrails, her degree was in Egyptology, so this is pretty much what her entire life has been leading up to, is an eclipse of the sun in the Valley of the Kings. And then July 22nd, 2028, crosses the southern hemisphere, and it goes through two of my favorite places in the whole world, Sydney Harbour in Australia and Queenstown on the South Island of New Zealand. I suspect I will be in Sydney. It's a sunset eclipse in Queenstown, so I wouldn't risk quite as much there. And there are some partial eclipses as well. I hope everybody in your part of the world saw the eclipse of October 25th, 2022. I sneaked out of work to take a quick look at it. About 30% covered, the sun covered from Elgin. There's another one, 2025, to 55% covered. And if you're willing to travel a little way, briefly at sunrise in southwest England, we'll see the end of the eclipse in June 29th, 2029. So do try and get to, well, not, you can get to the partial one, so you don't have to move too far from Elgin, but try and get to at least one of those total eclipses. The European ones, you've got no excuse. You can get to Madrid quite easily, and or Reykjavik or wherever else. Here's your chance. Go for it. So I'll just finish by saying thank you so much to Nick James, Andres Smolla, Philippe Lopez, and Miloslav Druckmiller, who let me use their world-class, utterly fantastic images. Lots and lots of kudos to Julie and Brian McGee, on the left and the middle there on that picture on the lake at Bariloche, and to the extraordinary people from the Euro Tour, the whole team. That's Juan, who runs the Euro Tour. They were magnificent, beyond, above and well beyond the call of duty. My final conclusion is when I got back from England, I had to self-isolate for 5 days. Well, fortunately, there was food in the freezer and there was beer in the fridge, so somehow I managed. I went for my PCR test to release, remember them, on December the 23rd. I got the results from that back on December the 24th. They were negative, and so I was able to celebrate Christmas in my girlfriend's house with other people, which is the way Christmas is supposed to be celebrated. For that to happen, everything had to go right from the moment I arrived at Heathrow Airport. All the tests had to be negative. We had to get all our people into Argentina, down to Neuquén or Bariloche, to the eclipse site and back again, and back to Buenos Aires and back onto their planes, and make sure that none of them came down with COVID. And somehow, against all the odds, we managed it. It's amazing. Kudos to Eurotour and Astrotrails. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Mike. That was fantastic. As I said, hopefully myself, I'm going to catch my first eclipse in the 2024 ones. I got family in Canada, in Ontario, so I'm planning a trip over there to see that. So I'm hoping the weather is going to be good for us for that one. Yeah, wonderful talk, wonderful pictures. I think we've got some questions coming in. So Chris, if you're there, we'll hand over to you for the Q&A.
Yes. Hi. Sorry, I've just activated my camera. I hope that's come up okay.
Yep, yeah.
So actually not really a question, but there was a message from Gareth Brown on the Q&A. He just says, I worked in Neuquén a few years ago and remember the wind and how friendly the people were. He hired a small car and tried to drive to the mountains, but it was so windy he gave up. The car was being blown all over the place. Red wine and beef, highly recommended. There was a general strike while he was there and 2 currency devaluations with the ATMs all empty. Great talk and thanks. So thank you very much, Gareth. If anybody else has any questions, please chuck them in. I do have a couple of comments from Rich. In fact, I have one myself. So one of the questions I was going to ask actually has already been answered with your list of observing for eclipses in the near future. What's the second question I've got is what sort of money are we looking at? And I know it's obviously location specific, but how expensive is it to go on one of these Astrotrails or Euro tours?
Yeah, they're not cheap because you have to all the accommodation is going to be more expensive simply because of the eclipse time, and they are can be difficult parts of the world to get to. So I think we're talking into four figures, £1,000 plus, and then an airfare on top of that, probably. I can't remember exactly. The Astrotrails website is of course open to everybody to look at, but bear in mind, Madrid is not a difficult place to get to, and the Eclipse itself is about 30-40 miles north of Madrid, so it's a beautiful city full of hotels, and you should be able to get to locations to be able to see it very easily. So you don't need Astrotrails to get to that particular one. Texas, is in a similar position. It's lots of excellent, lots of big cities with loads of hotels. They will not be phased by something of this sort of size. We get a lot of people going to see it, but it's no more than, say, holding the Super Bowl. Those sorts of numbers there. So you can travel under your own steam. I did that for the 2017 Eclipse in Oregon. For something like Australia, it's more difficult because all the hotels have been booked up for ages. So it's really only the tour companies who are organizing. And traveling on your own in Australia, you've got to know what you're doing. The distance between towns is huge in Western Australia, and you dare not break down. You're really stuffed. You're relying on other people finding you if you do. So I wouldn't, for somewhere like Western Australia, you really have to know what you're doing with that. And so entrusting yourself to a tour company like Astrotrails, who've got years of experience and all the right connections with the local agents to be able to run things, that's probably the best time to do it. I mean, there are times when you have to go with a tour company. This was one of them. There's no way people were going to be able to get into them, and if you are doing it, well, Astrotrails managed to get groups into Argentina when nobody else did. It's they I'm staggered by how much they managed to do it. And they say I think a lot of that's down to the local agents. So it's not cheap, but nor is it completely out of the it's not cheap, but it's affordable, shall we say?
Yeah. And you get the benefit of a guest astronomer, I guess, as well.
Yeah, indeed.
So Rich has put a couple of questions in, actually. What is the latitude of the viewing site? I'm assuming he's returning to the one that you saw in South America. And how does it compare to the UK in latitude?
Yeah, it's
sort of weather
yeah, it's a good point. It's the latitude was minus 39.96, so 40 degrees south. So we are talking, it's kind of northern Spain, isn't it? That sort of south of France, northern Spain, and it feels like that.
Cool. And the last question, so if anybody else has any more questions, please chuck them in the Q&A. But the last question is to Rich. What is the most surreal part of your eclipse viewing? Obviously, accepting the stunning, absolutely fantastic images that you've shown already of the prominences, etc. But what was the most surreal part of your eclipse viewing?
I would say I love eclipses. Actually, for surreal, you should really book me for my talk on the eclipse we did up in Svalbard in 2015, where everything was utterly bonkers. I mean, if you think this is mad, the Svalbard trip was just extraordinary. I mean, not too many eclipses where you have to worry about polar bears. I don't think there's any. I don't think there were any anacondas in the stream in Argentina. So I think the horses were very friendly. So I think it was. The surreality was for the Patagonian trip was the enormity of it all. Doing something fairly mad and not tremendously sensible in the middle of a pandemic. I think it was just, you think, should we really be doing this? And the answer was yes, provided you took all the precautions. And we did take all the precautions, but it could have all gone completely pear-shaped. We could have all come down with COVID. There wasn't a vaccine at the time, so who knows what might have happened. We had to all take insurance in case we were hospitalized in Argentina for months. That sort of thing that added somewhat to the cost, but it did all come. I would say the timing of it, again, you talk about surreal. Had it been a couple of weeks earlier, I suspect the Argentinian authorities wouldn't have got their act together and they wouldn't have let us in. And just as we got back to England, the Delta strain of COVID took off. And you remember that was the Kent strain. That was actually in England. So had it been 2 weeks later, I suspect Argentina would have just said nobody coming from England. So there was the narrowest window of opportunity to actually get into Argentina, and somehow we managed to take advantage of it. And it's just the sheer chutzpah of being able to organise a trip like this in these circumstances. That's what I'd say was surreal about this trip. But
Excellent.
no polar bears.
Thank you very much. Well, maybe we can book you the Svalbard talk for 24 or 25.
I do. I give talks on many of my Eclipse trips, but my two favourite ones are this one and the Svalbard trip. Just bonkers.
Thank you. So there's no other questions. So with that, thanks very much. I'll hand you over to Rich.
Mike, thanks very much for an excellent talk. I particularly enjoyed your very enthusiastic delivery, and you had a lot to talk about, and you told us a great story. It's because a lot of our talks are very, factual and telling a sort of story and everything, but this was very much a sort of modern day adventure. So thank you very much for an excellent delivery. And we've got a whiskey tumbler for you here.
Oh, excellent.
Like to send you as a vote of thanks and as a thank you for doing it. So we hope you enjoy this and get to enjoy some nice whiskey in it anyway. Okay, thank you very much. So I'll hand back over to Pete.
Okay, Chris and Rich, thank you very much for handling that a little bit. Yep, as I say, wonderful, wonderful talk. As I say, hopefully it has infused a few of our members to get out there and chase these total eclipses. I know it's infusing me even more ready for 2024. Right, so we'll head off to the break now. We'll have a quick 10-minute break. After that, Mick, I'll have a few of the members' photos to show you, and then Mick will be doing the morning sky at night, and I'll be doing a bit of club news, and I'll be talking a little bit about a comment we're going to try and plan for later on in the month as well then. So once again, Mike, thank you very, very much, and you're quite welcome to stay for the second half and watch us through that if you want to, and hopefully we'll meet you again soon, somewhere under a total eclipse sun. Maybe.
Thank you.
Thanks very much again. Okay, we'll see you in about 10 minutes, everybody. Okay, welcome back, everybody. You'll notice on this screen here, I've made a bit of a boo-boo. It says that we're having a gathering link after this. Is an old slide that I forgot to take that bit out of. We're not actually doing a gathering after this one tonight. Okay, so ignore that bit. I'm going to go on now with the members' photos. Get them to display. Some crackers come through this month. Absolute stunning images come through this month. Alan Tuss been at it again with his remote imaging from Mexico. This is of the comet that's brightening rapidly, I believe, at the moment. It's almost naked eye, I believe, but Mick will tell us more about that later on. So comet C2022 E3. And he imaged this by using data from two remote control telescopes in New Mexico on the 20th of December. So the full details at the bottom of the image there, if you can see it. This is actually on the web page anyway, so you can pick it up anytime and have a look at that. But this image shows stunningly the dust and ion trails coming out of that comet. If you've never seen a comet before, get out there and get looking for it, because they are something stunning to see in the sky. And as you're watching them, you'll actually notice they are actually moving across the background stars. It's a stunning thing to see as a comet. But I'll tell a little bit more about that in the club news, what we're planning to try and do for the club to get a look at that one. Okay. This one came in from Ray Palmer very late, a couple of days ago. He was out imaging the moon the other night, and he got this cracking image of crater Copernicus there. This is the big crater to the right-hand side. It's absolutely stunning, and the mountain ranges around it there as well. It's, let's say, the moon again. If you never had a look at the moon through, through a telescope, get out there, have a look. I say, don't forget, club's got 2 telescopes you can borrow. If you haven't got a telescope, let us know if you want it. Please let us know, because as I say, they're just gathering dust at the moment, and I'm sure Rich could do with a bit of space in his front room. So well done for Ray for that one. And then we've got Alan again. He was out taking images of Mars. I say, quite astounding the detail he's got on there. You can see the polar caps. This is the same image, I think, just inverted. You can see north and south. You can see the northern polar cap there, all white on the top, and you can see the surface detail as well. And quite impressively, if you're looking at where the north is at the top of the left-hand image, you will actually see there's a dark spot, and that's Olympus Mons, which is the highest mountain in the solar system, about 3.5 times the size of Mount Everest. Well done, Alan, for that one. Okay, Ray again. He's been a busy boy. He's been out, this is the Andromeda Galaxy, M31, the only galaxy, well, yeah, the only galaxy that you can see with your naked eye, 2.5 million light years away. As I say, first out on his new camera, the ASCAR 300. The ASCAR 300 from. So he struggled with some as well, but I can't see the struggle there, Ray, because the way you've got out M32 and that as well. As I say, you had a very bright moon he is battling with. And I meant to look up what the galaxy is that's down in the bottom right-hand corner. You see a very faint galaxy, edge on spiral, I would think. If anybody knows, I'm sure they can let me know in the chat. But a stunning image. And Ray again, I think I might have shown this one last month, but I wasn't sure, so I put it in again. This is part of the Pelican Nebula in the constellation of Cygnus. Say, quite hard to see naked eye, this one. I think you do need a sort of special filters to see this one, if I remember rightly. And say, absolutely stunning image there. The tenuous gas clouds within that beautiful star field. And Ray again, on his out. And this is something that anyone have a go at, especially with even camera phones nowadays. If you've got an exposure on your, exposure setting on your camera, just point out towards the Milky Way, and you'll be amazed at how many stars you can see. All right, I think someone's come up with the answer to what I was saying. Now, M101 is the other one, but there's a very, very faint one I was looking at bottom right. I'll go back and show you, Mick. Mick just come and said it was M101, but I know M101. If I put pointer on, where's my pointer's gone? I can't find my pointer. The one I was looking at was this one just down here. Just along here, look, Mick. So maybe you can have a look at that and tell us what that one is there, because I've never actually seen that one myself when I've been looking up, always looking at Andromeda and M32 and M101. But never noticed that one down there. Right, so on to that one. Say the Milky Way. It's always nice to look at the Milky Way. And finally, we have this image here come from Eric Walker, the chairman of HAAS. He himself has been out imaging Mars. And once again, the detail he's got here is absolutely stunning. I say this with his 11-inch and a 2x TeleView Barlow and the ZWO ASI 071 camera. Absolutely brilliant. And to say, just to give you, some information, he uses fire capture to capture the images, and use auto stacker and Registrax and WinDupes and Photoshop to process the image. But what's good here, he's actually inlaid what you can actually see on the surface up here. Absolutely stunning. As I said, Olympus Mons is probably there somewhere. No, it's in a different light. No, but as I say, absolutely wonderful images. So, and now over to Mick for what you can see in the night sky. You can see most of that and much more. So Mick, over to you.
All right, thanks, Pete. Let me just get back here. Yeah, I couldn't find that. I had a quick look on Stellarium for that
No,
galaxy.
I don't think.
No
I
idea.
don't think Ray's on tonight. Maybe you can let us know. I meant to look myself the other night, but I forgot all about it. That's my age. Okay, we've got you.
Excuse me. Okay, right. Happy New Year to everybody, and welcome to Sigma's January 23 edition of the Monday Sky Night. My Night Sky Guide tonight. So I'm going to cover the stuff I'm going to cover is just going to supplement what's in this month's newsletter. There's one or two things maybe that I'll mention. The monthly challenge will be the same, and I'll talk about the comet as well at the end. So I'll start with the usual quick run through planets, what we can see through the month, meteors and the moon, what the moon's doing, possible photo opportunities as usual. And I'll finish off, well, then I'll do a tour of a portion of the night sky, and then we'll talk about the comet. So this was the view tonight at 1600. Pretty much the same tomorrow. As far as Venus goes, if you're looking at southwest, Venus just before it sets. Moving across to the east, we can see Saturn in Capricornus, Jupiter in Pisces, Mars in Taurus, and the rising full moon, which was stunning tonight. I actually seen it this morning as well. It was awesome. Then if we move round to, I'll go later on tonight. Move around to the north. Excuse me. There we go. Northeast. Okay, so the quadranted meteor shower, which began on the 28th of December, is still continuing. It peaked on the 3rd, 4th of January, and it finishes on the 12th. But the radiant of it is this area here, so pretty much north at 9 o'clock tonight. At the top end of the Big Dipper, if you imagine, around this area. So anywhere above the horizon, if you look, you should hopefully be able to see some meteors up until the 12th. Looking to the south, come back down to the south again. Okay, so tomorrow night we'll have the full moon's going to be just within 1.9 degrees of Pollux. Tomorrow, sorry, the 8th, the moon is going to be apogee, so that's its furthest distance from Earth at 406,500 kilometers. On the 10th, the moon will be just by Regulus in Leo, 4.6 degrees of it. Moving swiftly forward to 18th, maybe 7. Right at sunrise, just before sunrise, the moon's going to be within 2 degrees of Antares in Scorpio, just before it sets. Moving to 22nd, 1700. Right, yeah, 22nd, just after sunset. Saturn and Venus are going to be very close together. So there's a chance you might be able to capture them if you wish. And the following night, you're going to have a crescent moon paying a visit as well. So there's a good chance to get a good snap there. 25th. Okay, 25th. Where am I going here? Okay, moon is heading towards Jupiter, and it's going to be just close to Neptune. And passing Jupiter, and then the 29th, it's going to be close by Uranus. So that's some possible photo opportunities. So now we're going to have a look around the Murray night sky. And tonight I'm going to make use of Bill Leslie's winter sky notes to tell you about the big G of the winter sky. So let me just get set up here. What I've done is I won't go to tonight because the next couple of nights the moon's going to be kind of getting in the way. I'll take some of this off. Where are we? Just get my field of view right, so we'll get the right time as well. Yeah, that's better. Okay, so this is a great way to find your way around it. Excuse me, to find your way around the winter sky. Another way you'll find out about the dominant constellations this time of the year and the names of some of the brightest stars. So starting at the 3 stars that make up Orion, which I'm pretty sure everyone can recognize. If we head 20 degrees northwest, we'll find Aldebaran, which sits in Taurus. Obviously be careful, if you look a bit too far up, you'll find Mars, which happens to be there at the minute, and it's a bit bigger and a bit brighter than Aldebaran. Aldebaran sits in the Hyades, which is part of, well, it's an asterism in Taurus. The Hyades, this kind of V-shaped pattern of stars here. Aldebaran isn't actually part of the Hyades because it's a lot closer than the other stars are. Oh, set him off. And then moving about, so that's the start of this big G as I'm talking about. We're going to walk around here. So moving about 30 degrees almost due north, we've got the brilliant Capella. And that's in the pentacle of bright stars which make up Auriga. Stellarium's actually drawn a 6 star there. You know you've got Capella because there's a little triangle of stars next to it known as the Kids. These are, I'll show you the artwork, which just happens to match up-ish. You can see the goat here and the Kids just next to it, and these stars representing the Kids, apparently. So that little triangle, you know you found Capella, although it is quite bright. So now traveling another 30 degrees southeast. I'm just going to leave the constellation lines up. It'll be a bit easier for everybody, I think. And we find the twins of Gemini, Castor and Pollux. Yeah, so Castor and Pollux, as you can see, they make up the heads of each of the twins. Continuing round what looks a barren patch of sky, we find the bright star Procyon, which lies in Canis Minor. And continuing further round, we have Sirius, the brightest star in the sky, the dog star in Canis Major. Traveling back up to Orion, we have, let me just, yeah, the most westerly star of the Hunter's Knees to find the brilliant white star Rigel. And moving up to the shoulders, we have Bellatrix. Oh, what's that? Still what I want. Go away. Bellatrix and Betelgeuse. Betelgeuse is a super giant, red supergiant, I should say. And if this star replaced our sun, it would stretch out almost as far as the orbit of Jupiter. It's that massive. So now have we look at the constellations a bit closer. So going back to the start of the G, so Taurus. As I said, its brightest star is in the Hyades, which is the head of the bull. I'll show the artwork on that. And if we follow up the horns to the bull, we've got Beta Tauri, or Elnath it's called here, and Zeta Tauri. Beta Tauri, as you can see, is actually makes up one of the stars of Auriga as well. About 10 degrees above the Hyades lies the jewel of the northern sky, the Pleiades, also known as the Seven Sisters, or M45. Beautiful open cluster, which is, it's very obvious to the naked eye, but there's a lot more than 7 stars to be seen. Through a pair of 10 by 50 binoculars, they look absolutely fantastic, like crystals. But before you turn your binoculars on them, count how many stars you can see with the naked eye. Under normal conditions, you should get about 6, but more can be seen under very clear skies using averted vision. And long exposure images show wisps of nebulosity that you can see here in this image, clouds of gas and dust, but these are very rarely seen with the naked eye. We can't leave Taurus without having a look at an object which is unique in Messier's list, and strangely the first object added to his catalogue of objects, M1, the Crab Nebula. So to find that, we head back along the bottom horn here to Zeta. And to find it, what to do is you've got these 2 stars here, and these 2 here, and the one in the middle here. Let me get the Crab Nebula. So this is a supernova remnant. So it's the leftovers of a giant star that tore itself apart in one of the most enormous explosions the universe ever experiences. And it's also the only supernova remnant that's listed in Messier's catalogue. Zoom out. Continuing up to Auriga, a distinctive pentagon, makes it an easy constellation to spot because of the brightness of Capella, and using these marker stars, the kids, will help you find the other stars. Main focus of interest here, there's a cluster of clusters, all visible through binoculars, but stunning and varied objects when observed through a telescope. 3 of the clusters are in the Messier catalogue, and they're all easy to find. So if going back down to Beta Tauri, oops, no, didn't want that, stand by. Right. If we go, do imagine a line up to the next star here, Theta Tauri. If we go about halfway, and then come up about 2 degrees, which is about here. Nope, not that one. There we go. We have M36. And another few degrees further up, we have M38. And you can see, you can kind of compare them. These are scattered quite wide, and these are closely bunched together. There's another one, NGC 1907, just here. And there's an even brighter cluster, M37. If we go back to the first one I showed you, M36, then just a couple of degrees to the opposite side of this imaginary line, we have M37. So continuing round our big G, we come to Gemini. And Castor at the head, the star at the head of Castor, takes the head, is actually a double star. I believe it's actually a triple star. It's very difficult to actually split these stars. I'm not even going to zoom in here on Stellarium because that just blows it all out and it doesn't separate them at all. So you need a lot of magnification if you want to try and split them. So out of Castor and Pollux, people always try which one's which. Well, Castor rises first above the horizon, followed by Pollux, and Castor comes first in the alphabet. C comes first in the alphabet before P. So there's an easy way to remember it. Or Castor's on the top if you want. So Gemini plays host to a wonderful open cluster, M35, and a hard to track down but a must-see planetary nebula. The open cluster, sorry, the open cluster M35, if you've come down the leg of Castor, zoom in, oh, not that far, and just a couple of degrees up from the end star here, we have M35. Now this cluster might just be visible to the naked eye in dark clear skies, and its stars can be partially resolved in binoculars, but through a telescope hundreds of stars can be picked out. So NGC, the next object, NGC 2392, planetary nebula, isn't easy to find or easy to see, but it's just southeast of Delta Gemini. Now where's that? Okay, so we head to the other twin, Pollux, and come down here. Now, just below, let me get that out of the way, just below, you can see there's like a triangle of stars here. Well, if I take the center one, this leg here of the triangle, and round about the middle, you're looking for this star just here. Yeah, just got it. The Eskimo Nebula. You're going to need a lot of magnification on this once you get on it to be able to see it though. So continuing round, or big G, you can see there's not a lot happening around Procyon. Oh. So we continue to Sirius. As I say, this is the brightest star in the sky. It's a double star with a companion Sirius B, which is a magnitude of 8.5. Unfortunately, it's extremely difficult to separate these two due to the glare of Sirius, but you could give it a go if you wished. And although it's bereft of bright stars, this area, it plays host to some glorious open clusters. One of note is M41, which lies just 4 degrees to the south of Sirius. Go straight down to about here. And let me just set that, zoom in. That is here. I'll get the words up in a minute. There we go. M41, the little beehive cluster. This cluster is easy to see through binoculars or even a finder scope. So as we head back up towards Orion to complete our G, there's another bonus target. So if we head back to Procyon and looking over to Betelgeuse, if you have an imaginary line and do about 2/3 of the way and just drop down a little bit to around here. Yeah, let me find it. We have the Rosette Nebula, NGC 2244. This is actually a huge star forming region, and it's larger than the Orion Nebula. The star cluster that you can see within the nebula is easy to see, but the nebula is quite a challenge, and that's going to require dark skies with very little light pollution and a good dark adaptation, and also an O3 or a UHC filter. So you can look on that one as a bit of a challenge to go with the monthly challenge when I get to it. So heading into towards Orion, we'll head to Orion's belt. And the stunning sight of the Great Orion Nebula is visible with the naked eye. So looking to the 3 stars that make up the belt, just hanging to the south of that is Orion's sword. And you'll see the center star, as it looks from the naked eye, looks a bit fuzzy. Looking through binoculars will confirm that. And you should also see stars above and below the nebula that are actually clusters of stars. Where's that going? off center. So this is M42, the Great Orion Nebula. And there's also a little comma-shaped nebula M43 here. A wee bit further up, you can see nebulosity around this cluster, NGC 1977, the Running Man Nebula. And I think if you squint and kind of look, I think there's legs, arms, a head, this end, I think. A little bit further north is a kind of W-shaped thing going on, NGC 1981. And one of the most elusive and sought after objects in the sky is, and you'll all have seen photographs of it, is the Horsehead Nebula. It's quite easy to find if we head to the left-hand star Alnitak and just come down one or 2 degrees. Oh, too far. The Horsehead Nebula. That's a designation it's got on here. I have it designated here as IC434. Ah, there we go. So this nebula is almost impossible to see through a telescope without the use of a hydrogen beta filter. And even then, you have to make sure that you keep Alnitak out of your field of view, or you're never going to see anything. So that's something worth seeing. And the last object of our tour tonight is 78, which I mentioned in the newsletter. And this is pretty easy to find as well. It's a reflection nebula. If you go about 2 degrees north, I've written down here, about 2 degrees north or 1 degree east of Alnitak, you find it here. So this is the brightest diffused reflection nebula in the sky. It's got an apparent magnitude of 8.3, or it says 8 on here, and it lies approximately 1600 light years from Earth. It can easily be seen in large binoculars and small telescopes, and they show a hazy comet-like patch of light with 2 10th magnitude stars that illuminate it. It's also visible in 10 by 50 binoculars as a dim patch, but that'll require clear, dark skies for it to be seen. Okay, so that concludes my night, the tour of the night sky, but I'm just, I mentioned, Pete mentioned as well, a comet, C2022 E3ZTF. So it's now well placed in the dawn sky, or the pre-dawn sky, I should say, sorry. And pretty much after, you can see that this time, I'll go to tonight. 6. You can see just now it's still below the horizon. In another couple of weeks, it will be circumpolar. So you'll be able to see it all night. If I take it up now, that's where it is at the moment. What we're doing is just center. Right. So it was discovered on the 2nd of March last year at a magnitude of 17, and it's now dropped down to 7.7. And it's getting closer and brighter. It's going to get to perihelion, which is its closest point to the sun, on the 12th of January at a distance of 1.1 astronomical units from the sun. And then after perihelion, it's going to move swiftly, which it's been hovering kind of around here for a while in this area. Well, to our view anyway. But it's going to start moving up quite rapidly through the sky. If I start going forward now, you can see its motion here. It should be circumpolar by about the 22nd, 23rd. So after dark, you should be able to see it, hopefully. Now that's dropped down to a magnitude of 6, so you should be able to definitely see that with binoculars. And it's closest to Earth the 2nd of February. but only 0.29 astronomical units or 27 million miles. And then it moves close to Capella on the 5th. I'll just show you the track right up to the 5th of Feb. Right next to Capella, look, in Auriga, which we've just discussed. What I'm just going to do before I'm going to stop my screen share, and I'm going to show you something I found the other night. Stand by, I've lost all, I'm close to it. I've just happened to lose all my controls, so there we go, got it. Right, this is a website I found while I was doing a little bit of research, trying to find if it burned itself out, if it was still there, what's going on. So this is in the sky with a dash in between .org. You can input your location, so I stuck Elgin in because that was all, I wouldn't find Lossiemouth. But this is the home page. If you just come down, there's loads of information on here. I didn't spend a lot of time on it, but here's the comet. Adverts, great. Right, so it gives you a list here. It shows you perihelion on the 12th. If you come down, it shows you on the 23rd, it's going to be visible all night from Elgin. Another thing, be careful you put Elgin UK in it because it came up with another one, I think. If you click on here, sorry, I clicked the wrong one, I think. Yeah, sorry, wrong one, that one. Right, this shows you the journey that it's got across the sky as we can see it. So from the 6th of January through the 14th, 21st, right the way through to February. That's its predicted journey. It's quite good. You can change the duration, you can change your image format, and you can put different objects in. Seems got quite a good website. The one that I found quite interesting, I wouldn't do this if you've had too many drinks, but you can zoom in and out on this, and it shows you its motion. So the little green dot, well, the big green, well, I think it's yellow. Yeah, that's the sun, obviously. The green dot here is the comet. Obviously, you get Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, and it shows you its motion. And you can move this around and look at up and down and all sorts. Right, I'm not going to dwell on that because it was just to give you a bit of information on a website that you can. So it's in the sky with dashes in between .org, and you can go and have a play yourself and put in other objects that you want to try and find if that's what you fancy. And that's all from me for this month, Pete. I'll see you all back here next month. You're muted, Pete.
Yep, brilliant stuff, Mick. To say, yep, following on from the comment there, to say that I'll just move straight into club news. That looks like a really good website. I've not seen that one before. So Heavens Above is a really good one as well. Gives you in-depth sort of star charts. Maybe Helen can drag that one up and put it on the website, so we can we can find it nice and easily. That'd be a good idea, along with the Heavens Above. But yeah, what we're planning, as I say, we're sort of planning round on the 20th and 21st, 22nd. That's a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Is to try and do a bit of a comet hunt and find this comet. The reason I've chose that weekend is basically because it's on the weekend of the new moon. Because the one thing you don't want to be having in the sky when you're trying to find a comet is a great big full sky. Sorry, is a great big sky full of moonlight, because it's a waste of time. So if we do it on that weekend, we got 3 nights. Hopefully one of them will be clear. Hopefully. Where we're going to do it, I'm not sure yet. There've been sort of mentioned about Califer Hill, or maybe down at Garmouth or something like that. But we'll have a think. I'll have a sort of bit of a recce around to see where's going to be the best place to see it. Califer Hill could be a possibility, though. And I don't be going too far, but I'll be dragging a couple of really big telescopes with me. So, but we'll see what we can do for that. Thumbs up if you're all up for that one. You can give a click on the button if you want. So not a lot of club news happening at the moment. Obviously, I mentioned the telescopes before. Please do get these telescopes. Don't panic if you've never actually used the telescope before. We will give you instructions on how to use it, or use them, one of them anyway. The Dobsonian is probably the easiest if you've never used a telescope before. So it's just a case of plonk it down and away you go. You know, all you got to do is line up the finder scope and away you go. But say we will give you instructions. Just let myself know, or Rich know, and we'll get to meet up and we'll hand the telescope over to you. So we've got the 6-inch Helios Dobsonian, as I say, nice and easy to use. It's just a what we call a shove-o-matic. You put it down, move it around. The refractor is on an EQ mount. If you've never used an equatorial mount before, you will need a little bit of instructions of how to set them up, but don't be scared. They are there for you to use, so please let us know if you want them. We normally charge a £5 fee just to cover any damage that might happen, but if you want that waived for any reason, you know, if things are tough, just let us know and we'll waiver the fee. We just want these telescopes used. They're just gathering dust at the moment. As I say, yeah, we haven't done, let's say in the newsletter, we haven't done a great deal of observing. The weather just hasn't been there. It's been too windy or full moon, or when it has been clear, not two of us are available to go out and run one. But as I say, as I said in the newsletter, we may be thinking about restarting what was called the Bothy Committee. Basically, when I first joined the club, I was asked to come onto the Bothy Committee. It was basically me, myself, and Sandra Brandingham to basically sort of organise the observings at the weekend. Maybe it's a case we start doing that again. If you're interested in doing that, let us know. To say all you'd be on the committee is just to arrange meetups, that sort of thing. Nothing to do with the running of the club if you don't want to do that. But it's another iron in the fire that we may be able to get and do a little bit more observing. Don't forget to invite a friend along to any meetings. So our next 2 meetings are going to be online. But if you've got any friends who want to come along, then just let us know. We can send them the link, or you can pass the link on to them if you wish. Don't forget, also, if you got anything from me, anything you think we're not doing right or we are doing right and you want to say thanks, well done for that, just contact me at any time. And I think that's it for now. And with that, I would like to thank Mike for his wonderful, wonderful talk and a look around Argentina. Nick, for your Sky at Night, it was really, really good. Okay, Mike's still here. Nick, for your Sky at Night, because they say that was a nice, easy one for anyone who's a novice astronomer to find your way around the sky. Orion is a wonderful signpost in the sky. You can find so many things from Orion and also things within it. Chris, for Q&A, Rich, for you're a little bit there and making sure everything's running smoothly. And for your good self for coming along. Hope you enjoyed the night, and we'll. Oh, sorry, next month. We will see you next month, which is going to be our great friend, Professor Martin Henry. If you've never seen one of Martin's talks, this is one not to miss. I think the last time he was with us was for the George Fraser Memorial Lecture. It's going to be 6 years ago now. I think it was 6 years ago. I'd say he'll be doing the dawn and the exciting future of gravitational wave astronomy. Martin is one of the leading experts in gravitational wave astronomy. He works at LIDO. You will probably remember we were lucky enough to have him speaking to us about 2 or 3 weeks after they had their first detection of a gravitational wave a few years back. That's on Friday the 3rd of February. It's on Zoom again. That'll be our penultimate one on Zoom. So I want to thank you all for coming along, and we'll see you next month. Thanks, everyone. Good night. Thank you, Mike.